Good morning, children. I hope all are safe and doing good. Let's survive this corona crisis and pray for a speedy return to school. We have already started the chapter on statistics in March. Hope you all have revised it. Okay, let's revise it. In the chapter statistics, we have discussed 3 measures of central tendency. Which are the 3 measures of central tendency? Did you remember? The first one is mean, and the second one is mode, and the last one is median. What is mean by mean of a data? We know that mean is the sum of the values of all observations divided by total number of observations. And we have 3 methods to find the mean of a data. Which are the 3 methods? Do you remember? The first method is direct method, second method is assumed mean method, and the last one is step deviation method. And the next central tendency is mode. Mode is the value of the observation having maximum frequency, which we call it as mode of a data. And the last one is the median. Median is the value of the middlemost observation in a data. Now, we shall move to the next topic, graphical representation of cumulative frequency distribution. The name itself, we can say that it is a cumulative frequency curve. So, a cumulative frequency curve is a curve that represents a cumulative frequency distribution of grouped data. There are 2 types of cumulative frequency distribution or cumulative frequency curve. Cumulative frequency curve is also called an ogive. So, there are 2 types of ogive. First one is less than type cumulative frequency curve or less than ogive. This means that an ogive representing a cumulative frequency of less than type is called less than type ogive. Here we consider only the upper class boundaries or upper class limits and the corresponding cumulative frequency of less than type. That is, draw x-axis and y-axis taking upper limits on x-axis and the corresponding cumulative frequency on y-axis. And after we plotting the points, we obtain a graph like this. This graph is called less than ogive. This graph is called less than ogive. So, in the case of less than type ogive, we consider only the upper class limits and also a cumulative frequency of less than type ogive. Next type is more than type ogive. Here we consider only the lower class boundaries and also cumulative frequency of more than type. Here also draw both the axes, x and y axis, and taking lower limits on x axis and the corresponding cumulative frequency on y axis, and plotting the points, we get a curve like this. This curve is called more than ogive. So, in the case of less than type ogive, taking upper limits on x-axis and the corresponding cumulative frequency on y-axis, and we get a graph like this. This graph is called less than ogive, and in the case of more than type ogive, we are taking lower limits on x-axis and the corresponding cumulative frequency of more than type on y-axis, and we get a graph like this. This graph is called more than ogive. And we can obtain the median from both this graph. Now the question is how to draw a less than type ogive. So let's start with an example. We have an example. I have an example of daily income of some workers. I have an example of daily income of some workers in terms of Indian rupees. From the table itself, we can say that this is a grouped data or class intervals. And here for the first class is 100 to 120, second class is 120 to 140 and so on. Here for the first class 100 to 120, the number of workers is 12. This means that 12 number of workers have a daily income 100 to 120 and 14 number of workers have a daily income 120 to 140 and 8 number of workers have a daily income 140 to 160 and so on. So we want to find the less than type, or we want to change this distribution to a less than type cumulative frequency distribution. So the second column is nothing but the frequency column. So first we want to add all these frequencies, that means 12 plus 14 plus 8 plus 6 plus 10, we get 50. Now we want to change this distribution to a cumulative frequency distribution. So we know that in a less than type cumulative frequency distribution, we consider only the upper limits and the cumulative frequency distribution of less than type. So what we'll do is, this is the question itself. So we want to form a new column with this upper limits. So here for the first class 100 to 120, 120 is the upper limit of the first class. Similarly, 140 is the upper limit of the second class. 160 is the upper limit of the third class. So let's form a new column with these upper limits. So write upper limits are 120, 140, 160, 180, 200, etc. And we want to draw a less than type ogive. So we write less than or less than. And we wrote upper limits at the top, upper limits, and we wrote all the upper limits 120, 140, 160, 180, 200. Next we want to form a new column with cumulative frequency. So we know that frequency till 120 is 12. So the cumulative frequency till 120 is the 12 itself. So the first cumulative frequency and the first frequency will be same. Next we want to find the cumulative frequency till 140. That is, we will add the frequencies from 100 to 140. Then only we get the cumulative frequency till 140. I repeat, cumulative frequency, we want to find the cumulative frequency till 140. That is, we will add frequencies from 100 to 140. That is, we want to add 12 plus 14. We get 26. So the second cumulative frequency is 26. Next we want to find the third cumulative frequency. That means cumulative frequency till 160. Cumulative frequency till 160 means we will add frequencies from 100 to 160. That is, we will add these three frequencies. Then only we get the third cumulative frequency. So 12 plus 14 plus 8 equal to 34. And the fourth cumulative frequency is 40. That is, we will add all four frequency, we get the fourth cumulative frequency. Similarly, we will add all five frequencies, we get fifth cumulative frequency. So we get the cumulative frequency column. I repeat, we want to find the upper limits. Upper limits means here each is a class interval and 120 is the upper limit of the first class, 140 is the upper limit of the second class. So let's form a column with these upper limits. So here we write the upper limits and we want to draw a less than type ogive. So we wrote less than. Next we want to find a column with this cumulative frequency of less than type. So what we'll do is, a cumulative frequency till 120 is the first frequency itself, 12. Next is, if we add first two cumulative frequency, we get the if we add first two frequencies, we get the second cumulative frequency and so on. Now let's plot these points on graph. We get We have the points 120, 12, 140, 26, 160, 34, 180, 40 and 250. These are our points. So, we want to plot these points on graph. We get a graph like this, that is 120 to 12, our point is this one, 120 to 12. Next is 140, 26, that is 140, 26. Next point is 160, 34, that is 160, 34. And the fourth point is 180, 40, this point. And also the last point is 250. We get this points. So after we plotting the point, just join these points, we get a smooth curve. This curve is called less than ogive. And we mark upper limits on x-axis and the corresponding cumulative frequency on y-axis. And there is a small discontinuity here because we have started the graph right from 100. So we get a less than type ogive. Next we want to calculate the median of this data. So the median means we calculate n by 2. This is called median. So where n is the total number of observations. So total number of observations means sum of all frequencies. So sum of all frequency means here we will add all frequencies, we get 50. So 50 by 2 is 25. So here our n by 2 is 25. So take a point whose ordinate is 25 and draw a perpendicular which meets the curve at a point. From that point, draw the perpendicular to x-axis and we get an approximately 139. So here 139 is the median. Next is how to draw a more than type ogive. So we have an example how to draw a more than type ogive. So we have a question like this. The following table gives the production yield per hectare of 100 farms of a village, and we have a table here, and the second column, that is number of farms, is nothing but the frequency column, and this is a grouped distribution, grouped data or grouped data or class intervals. So in a more than type ogive, we consider only the lower limits and the corresponding cumulative frequency. So we want to form a new column with these lower limits. So we know that for the first class 50 to 55, 50 is the lower limit of the first class. Similarly, 55 is the lower limit of the second class and 60 is the lower limit of the third class. So let's form a column with these lower limits. So first we form a column with these lower limits. So we write a column, first column is lower class limits, and we write all this lower limits, and we want to draw a more than type ogive, so we wrote more than. So more than and all the lower class limits. Next we want to draw next we want to find corresponding cumulative frequency. In the case of less than type ogive, first cumulative frequency is same as the first frequency. Here in the case of more than type ogive, last cumulative frequency is same as the last frequency. So we have the last frequency is 16. So the last cumulative frequency is also 16. I repeat, in the case of less than type ogive, first cumulative frequency and the first frequency is same. But in the more than type ogive, last cumulative frequency and the last frequency is same. So here last cumulative frequency is 16 and also last frequency is also 16. Now we add each frequency from the bottom. So last cumulative frequency is 16. So we add the last two frequencies, 16 plus 38, we get 54. Next we add last three frequency, we get the last third cumulative frequency. So we get the cumulative frequency column. So in the case of less than type ogive, first cumulative frequency and the first frequency is same. In the case of more than type ogive, last cumulative frequency and the last frequency is same. And we get a column like this: 100, 98, 90, 78, 54, 16. Now we want to plot these points on graph, and remember one thing, our points are 50, 100, 55, 98, 60, 90, 65, 78, 70, 54, 75, 16. So we want to plot these points. On graph. We get a graph like this. In the case of more than type ogive, taking lower limits on x-axis and the corresponding cumulative frequency on y-axis, and we plot these points 50, 100, 50, 100, 55, 98 and so on, and join these points, we get a graph like this. This graph is called more than type ogive or more than ogive. Today we have discussed cumulative frequency curve or ogive. An ogive means it is a curve that represents a cumulative frequency distribution of grouped data is called ogive, and we have discussed there are two types of ogive. First one is less than type ogive and the second one is more than type ogive. In the case of less than type ogive, we consider only the upper limits and their corresponding cumulative frequency. And remember one thing, the first cumulative frequency and the first frequency will be same, and we are adding each frequency, we get the corresponding cumulative frequency. In the case of more than type ogive, we consider only the lower limits and the corresponding frequencies. So here last cumulative frequency and the last frequency will be same, and we are adding for each frequency from the bottom, we get the cumulative frequency column. Okay, thank you. Have a nice day.